if this guy was completely on the ground, in a tactical scenario, there's no more gunfight, so we have the time, the tactical situation lends itself to doing something more of a procedure. We told you in the first class, tourniquet's more of an immediate action drill, all right? As quick as a mag change, as soon as the threat's down, you stop the leaks close to the house. Because statistically, hemorrhage out of your extremities will kill you the quickest, and tourniquets are quick, we can do that in kind of a hot zone immediately post-threat, self-assess, get the tourniquet off. Wound packing, we want to do as close to that phase of the spectrum as we can because junctions are a major bleed as well. But we know if you should be threat focused, you can't be buried in your med kit getting your gauze up. So as soon as the situation lends itself, we do a quick hemorrhage control assessment. We find a wound that's too high in the junction for a tourniquet to work. We get our proximal pressure on, or our buddies holding pressure close to the core as we can. Where I showed you with the Doppler last class, if it's on an upper extremity, where you put your knee is where your hands would go if you're using a buddy to help you. So we'll say Nick has got good proximal pressure. He has both hands free to do work. There's no other threats. He's gonna get his gauze out. Now, he's gonna attempt, because all of these are gonna get dipped in the blood so you guys can see what it's like working on plastic that's been soaked in blood with your hands, all right? But I want you guys to try this, opening those packages and see how much of a pain they're on. And that will kind of reinforce where having trauma shears in your kits are a good option. If you can tear it open, good for you. Notice what Nick is doing. He's cutting as close to the dressing, the gauze, as he can to get that vacuum seal popped. Because these can be a little bit of a pain. And then once the gauze is open, he's going to find one of the free ends. Now to set this up, he's going to take one bite or one fold of that material, so about 2 to 3 inches worth, over the top of the finger. Now notice what he's not going to do is wrap it a few times and tie it off like he's going to rappel off of it. All right, because most people want to wind it up and make this, I've heard the term a little speed ball that helps pop that gauze into the wound track. It's a way. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying I haven't seen the extra value or the research why that's better. All right. So just take one fold over the top of the finger, because gauze that goes in should not come back out. That's one of the training takeaways today. I'm not so concerned about technique and which hand you're using. This might be unnatural for you guys to get the hang of it. Gauze that goes in does not come out, and you do a small deliberate amount, and this is going to be a procedure. I don't want you to cram all the gauze into the wound at one time, because if you wad that up and shove that in the wound, you're going to create air pockets, and where air can go, that means that's space that blood can get into. So remember what we're trying to do here. Gauze that goes in does not come back out. He's going to start to feed that using one hand controlling the amount of material and the other one maintaining control of the material coming in, and he starts to hook it and bring it into the wound. The direction that he's going to pack is towards the heart. So if this is our pump station, this sometimes can be a blind procedure. You want to try to see the bleeding source if you can. So getting pooled blood out of the wound, getting your pressure on, and looking at the wound. If you can see where that blood is originating from, that's exactly where you want to go. 9 times out of 10, that artery might retract. This might be low light. There might be a lot going on. So we pack towards the core of the body. Into the wound and down and up towards the heart is the direction we want that pressure to be focused, because we might be able to feel that pulsating artery, and that's going to be the indicator we're in the right spot. Even if you can't, if you remember the plumbing, bigger pipe, bigger problem, all right? We know the blood's coming from there regardless if we can spot it or not. So the direction is going to be that way. That's why he's hooking and bringing in that material, all right? So as he feeds that in, and this is going to be one continuous process for Nick because we're not changing over, he's using long-rolled gauze. If you had combat gauze and that went in first and you used it all, if all you have is combat gauze, you would just continue with another pack. If you have sterile gauze, it is okay to conserve your resources and use your sterile gauze as a backer behind the hemostatic, which is what I talked about in those early slides, all right? Because really, if it's not touching the bleeding source, it's really, really high dollar sterile gauze, is using more combat gauze, really. All right, so if you have sterile, that goes behind it as your backing material. And all we're doing is repeating the process till we have nowhere else to go in that wound track, and it's packed nice and dense like a golf ball. And these bottles will provide some feedback for us. If we can't get any more down the line, you guys are doing it right. So while Nick is finishing that up, does anyone have any questions? Has anyone done this before live in the field and would like to share the experience? Okay. This can take a lot of material depending on where it's at in the body, just so you can get an appreciation for it. One of the more notable ones that I experienced was a 7.62 wound at point blank. An Iraqi male got ambushed in his sedan with an AK, and he took one in this pelvis and came out this glute. I had going on 6 rolls of material in this dude. So me and my fellow medic were working this guy's pelvic area, getting that much material into this guy before we can get somewhat controlled, where we can do some damage control resuscitation and get a medevac relatively stable. It can take a lot of material. So this is just a cross section of what we're calling a thigh. Remember, a dude that's bigger than me, a full like athlete leg, through and through is going to take a lot of material. And a lot of guys will ask, especially since I said through and through, some guys will ask, well, if I have an entry and exit, which one do I start with? The real answer is whichever one you make a decision on, own it and do it efficiently, and don't forget about the other hole. Some guys like to say whichever one's bleeding more apparently. Also a good move, you're not wrong. If you remember, bigger pipe, bigger problem, closer to the core, I tend to look at the one that's higher and start. But in reality, you know, the one I see on the leg is the one I'm going to own, but because I'm experienced in that March tactical assessment, I will find another hole and I will either delegate or remember to come back to it. And if I'm using good proximal pressure technique, I don't care how many holes are in the hose. Remember, if I'm up against the house, I can slow everything down regardless of where those holes are located and address them as I see fit. So just remember those key takeaway principles, all right? That'll kind of guide you. So, as I'm talking and Nick's annoyed at me, I did that for a reason, because when we're done, we have to hold direct pressure, all right? So this works by filling all voids and uninterrupted pressure, followed by sustained pressure for 3 minutes is our gold standard, all right? Some of these claim 1 minute, old school standards 3 to 5, instructional videos will say 2 to 3. Our experience, 3. We go middle of the road, and I'm not shortchanging because everything happens under duress. We think it's happening a lot slower than it really is. Go for your full 3 minutes. If you have nothing else to do and the area is secure, have someone keep time. I don't care. You need that uninterrupted direct pressure for this to take effect. Kind of like C4. What do you need for C4 to go off? We got any breachers in here? Heat and pressure. Heat and pressure. All right. So this works with good packing and pressure. That's how we start to get hemostasis with this, or start to form an effective clot medium. Go ahead.
So you're putting the one in and then you're doing the pressure, or you just keep feeding it until you're out of material?
I would fill that wound with all the bulk material I can until I have no more voids in that wound track, and then continue to hold direct pressure. Now with good packing technique, you've had relatively constant pressure on this wound, and especially some of the trainers, some of the trainers that provide biofeedback, quick strokes, maintaining kind of a hand over hand, you're getting that constant pressure through that entire phase of wound packing. But I'm not gonna do what he's doing until that entire wound is filled. All right.
So you just keep going until, because I have no experience with this, so this is just shove it in there until you got nothing else to get in.
Pack. If that whole roll of combat gauze got in there, I hold pressure on, hey, get me another gauze, open it, pack till I cannot get any more material into that wound track. Once it's packed nice and dense, I can't get any more material. You take all the excess that didn't make it in, pile it on top, make the rest, and then go right back to that. Can you go back to the pressure position for me? So direct, uninterrupted pressure, CPR compression level pressure with no recoil phase. That's how tight we gotta park on this thing for 3 minutes, all right? Once 3 minutes have passed, we're gonna take our hands off the wound. We're gonna take the top layer off. Grab the bottom. We're gonna take the top layer off and check for bleeds. Good job, man. If there's no more active bleeding, all that material goes back on top, and we battle dress it and move on. Continue the assessment or get back in the fight. If for some reason that is still actively bleeding, if we have more combat gauze, first thing we're gonna do is double check and make sure there's no voids we missed in that wound track. But if we're still actively bleeding, if we have combat gauze, we will go back to proximal pressure, get fresh combat gauze on that wound. So this is the one time I'll tell you we work backwards and start with fresh clotting agent and get a fresh combat gauze in that wound track. If we don't have any more combat gauze, we continue to build the nest and add more sterile. Just like we were trained old school, All right, it is our method. There's other ways out there. I'm not teaching you bad medicine. I'm teaching you what I know to be the gold standard. If all you have left is more sterile gauze, you continue to build the nest, continue to battle dress. The only time we want to work backwards and expose that wound again is if we have more clotting agent available to try to get a more precise location on the source of that bleeding. Make sense? Is there any questions? All right. So we're going to rotate in and out. You guys can help each other as buddy teams because more